Welcome to Shareholder Primacy from Free Float Media, a podcast about activist investing, securities law, and all the ways the financial and legal worlds intersect and collide in real life. Normally, I'm here with Ann Lipton, law professor at Tulane, but Ann, once again, is traveling to another conference, another academic gathering. So, Ann and I invited Lauren Thomas. She is the lead deals reporter for the Wall Street Journal to join us for a chat about activist investing and deals and all sorts of fun stuff. Lauren and I have known each other for a little while here, where I love reading the stuff she comes up with in the journal, and I hope she enjoys getting insights from activist investing when she interviews me. So we're going to talk about activist investing, corporate governance, and also maybe if we have some time, what it's like being a journalist covering activists in the business world. Lauren, say hi.
Yes. Hello. Thank you for the warm welcome and awesome
thanks for being here. So you got off to a busy start, and I think we've been trying to schedule this for a while, and we couldn't because you were in Davos. How was that?
Yeah. No, it was my first time going. Just got back a few days ago, so I'm still recovering from the jet lag.
Are you getting lagged? Okay, good.
Yeah, I'm getting there. But no, it was an amazing experience. I mean, this year in particular, I think the timing was really unique. It overlapped with the inauguration in D.C. Right. So just as Davos was kicking off, Trump was getting sworn into office. So it was fascinating to kind of be on the ground there and to have these world leaders, from all over and get perspective in real time. Was really interesting.
All right, so there's probably some good scoops and some good insights. You didn't just party your butt off there, right? I assume. No, okay.
No, I tried to. I was proud of myself. The days start really early and go really late, and hopefully not too late. But knowing that I had to wake up most mornings on the early side, tried to call it a night at a reasonable hour. But it was great for a reporter. It was great for sourcing, definitely.
Wonderful. Well, so that was a busy part of the one part of the busyness of the year, but there's also been a bunch of activist stuff that's kind of got going. What have you started to cover? What have you started to see? What are some of the things you've been reporting on lately? Just to kind of let's set the stage.
Yes. Yeah. No. Fantastic. It has been. And so it's almost the end of January, it's the start of the year, and this is typically when we kind of see the activity levels pick back up, right, as these
Correct.
Nomination windows open up. So I think that was kind of my expectation heading into the new year. But it's interesting. I did a piece, which we actually spoke about, that published at the end of 2024. Yes. And it kind of got at this idea that, when you look at some of the data or looked at the data from last year, there weren't as many fights, I guess, that went all the way to a shareholder vote. And so that was kind of a continuation of a trend, not necessarily anything new, but just you were seeing more settlements, and also settlements struck much more quickly between companies and activists.
Exactly. Yes.
So kind of expecting, I feel like we've already seen a bit of that. And the one other theme and what the story kind of got at was just the newer crop of activists. Like, one thing that I continue to hear from the advisor community is that they're seeing these newer firms show up that they've never heard of before, that are pushing for things often behind the scenes at companies. So kind of this uptick in activity driven by newer players, I think.
So the lawyers and the proxy solicitors and all these advisors are saying, there's all these kind of, I don't know if they're younger or older, but newer kind of fund managers,
right?
That have, and we did talk about that, and that's a really interesting trend. Even how they think about activism, investing, and so forth is probably a little different.
Totally. Well, we've covered this situation closely, and there was some news very recently around this medical dental supply company, Henry Schein. And
I've been following them for years.
Yeah. Well, so you had a newer player, Charlie Pinner, who was, kind of famously, he was at Jana, and then he was at Engine Number One, and then he started this new firm, Anonym, with his co-founder, Alex Silver. They were in Henry Schein. And preparing to possibly nominate for board seats, and you just had the news break, or we broke it in the journal.
You broke, not we. You. I think you broke this.
The Wall Street Journal. I broke that that KKR had also been there building a stake. Super interesting situation, and now KKR has board seats at Henry Schein. But it sounds like N&M, and we got a quote from Charlie. But it sounds like they're pleased with the outcome. But how
Great.
unique, and kind of like you're seeing a new cast of characters. Yeah,
it's hard not to be kind of pleased if you're N&M.
well, yeah.
Well, put it this way: you
And
have
then,
no choice but to be pleased. If
and
it's
KKR shows up. No kidding. Exactly. Probably kind of a vote of confidence, I guess you could say, in the investment. But yeah.
Right. So okay. So that's an interesting. That didn't exactly settle with the activists, but it kind of settled in a way where
N&M probably won't nominate board seats.
Right, but they will probably. I mean, I didn't look at the share price this morning, but I guess it's doing pretty well.
It's up. Yeah.
And so that would be, another example of one where you were trying to, keep everybody abreast, and then this kind of settlement sort of just kind of came out of nowhere. So, wow.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I think it's just the year's kind of getting started. The quote unquote proxy season is kicking off, but there's a lot of chatter, I think, behind the scenes. So it'll be interesting to see, what sees the light of day.
Now, one that did get to as I like to say, a voting outcome was Air Products with Mantle Ridge and Paul Halal. I don't know how much cover. I don't know if you were working on that or others were, or what your role or what your how much you would report on that.
Yeah, no, I think we I broke the news. When was it? At some point last year when they first showed up, and then of course you had D.E. Shaw also there for a period of time. So that was kind of, I don't know, maybe you think of it as that was a situation in which they were swarming this one company. Right. But I didn't break as much news on it throughout, but was following it very closely. But I think my biggest takeaway on that one, and something that advisors have been talking about since the vote in recent days, is just this whole idea of anti-DEI, anti-ESG, and how that was at play in the Air Products situation, I guess.
Explain that. I had only seen a little bit about it. How is that? What were you hearing about why DEI or ESG or whatever was a factor there?
Well, I think it was relevant. But Mantle Ridge was criticizing Air Products, some moves that it had made over the years to kind of get away from the core, like industrial gas, their strategy around that. And it had been making investments in like cleaner energy, green investments. And so that was one criticism that the firm had highlighted. And so, I just thought that seems to have stuck with some people. And like, there's this question of, will we see more of that now, especially with Trump in office? Oh, yes. No,
there's a raging debate among the people I've been in touch with that, how's it going to affect not just company approaches to DEI, but how investors and shareholders think about that stuff. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Yeah. So, another thing I'll talk about a little later is I guess you're not full-time on activism, but you have been starting like around 2022, right? Is that when you joined the Journal?
Yes, I joined in 2022, exactly. I came over from CNBC. And my job has also, I know the title is, deals reporter, but within that, it's kind of M&A and activism lumped in together. And so I would say, me personally, on any given week, like I'll kind of ebb and flow. I'm like more in the M&A world, or I'm more in the activism world, just depending upon
depending what news is there and what your editors are feeling and seeing and so forth.
What's going on? But there's so much overlap between the two, as you know. Activists, are often pushing for M&A.
For a deal. So what are some of the most memorable? I mean, 3 years is probably. What are some of the biggest things you've worked on since you started? What were your favorites that you'd kind of had a chance to look at?
Yeah, I would say, well, right when I showed up at the Journal, which was like the fall of 2022, that was right. Little did I know at the time, but that was right as Nelson Peltz and Trian were building a stake in Disney for the first time. And then I would go on to break that news, I guess, in late 2022, that they were there. And then you had Bob Chapek lose his job, and Iger came back in. And obviously
you saw all this stuff. I mean, I kind of started paying attention only after it became public.
Right.
But
Right.
you were kind of had your finger on that pulse, so to speak,
Behind the scenes. Yeah, we
in
knew, like, it
advance.
seemed like
Oh,
something was at play. And then of course that saga lasted what, like two
oh,
two
is it?
years.
Yeah, that took a while.
And
Oh, right,
and
because
yeah.
Nelson Peltz originally just nominated himself.
Right, right. We had round one, and then he came back later, round two.
Right.
When they were arguing the stock, hadn't done enough for them, and so that was just super memorable. And that was like a perfect. I mean, the Wall Street Journal was obsessed with that story generally. So we had not just myself, but our media reporter over in Los Angeles was like covering it with me
Sure.
very closely. So it kind of turned into this team effort across the newsroom to cover the whole Disney situation, because it's Disney. So like, obviously,
Right.
Our readers are fixated on these big American companies.
And you were able to follow that kind of story
Mm-hmm.
for many, many months. There was a
Yeah.
lot kind of developing, and it would kind of ebb and flow, and there'd
You
be some,
couldn't-
but it wasn't
Yeah.
something you'd like sort of do reporting for a month or two and then it would be done.
No, exactly. Not like some of these, right? Where there's like
Right.
a clear end and finish. I mean, even now, I think it's still fair to kind of keep it on. It's always on the radar, maybe not top of mind, but like always
Right.
kind of keeping in mind this idea of, do they show up again, or does someone else show up again?
I don't know.
Um,
I mean, I think
so-
Trian's out. I think they sold everything.
They did, I mean, they made they made a nice they made a
Made a
nice
lot of
profit
money.
on that. So yeah.
Oh yeah, no, that, I mean, because we can talk about whether that was, who won, who lost. Everyone loves kind of trying to add up
The winner and the loser, right.
exactly.
But sometimes it's hard to. Right, it's hard to say.
I mean, at
Not so
Disney,
black and white.
Disney, everybody's a winner because Bob Iger kept his job and is still as powerful as ever. I think he just got a huge raise last year, and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
even though he's supposed to have retired, and Nelson Peltz made a lot of money. I
Right.
mean, maybe the loser was Ike Perlmutter, who didn't get what he wanted out of this. So
Yeah. You had that at play too. It was a very unique situation, but that was definitely at least one of the ones that was
Yes.
most memorable.
all right. Any others you want to talk about? Because I'm going to ask you about looking forward in a bit.
Yeah, one other. I mean, I personally enjoyed covering the situation at Starbucks. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah. Yes. So you were reporting on Starbucks too.
Yeah,
The Starbucks
because
thing with the SEIU. I can't remember the union. SEIU.
Well, it was both. Both. I broke the news that social SOC, I believe it was.
SOC, right? Yes.
That this was like kind of a social activist group. So we first broke that news. I mean, that must have been 2 years ago, which was kind of a unique, like with universal proxy in play. That was like putting it to the test a little bit. Everyone was
Right,
anticipating that with universal proxy, we'd see like new flavors of activism. So that was interesting. But then fast forward to, I guess, this past year, when there was all this noise all of a sudden in Starbucks that like real activists were there. And I broke the
Real
news
activists.
that
Don't tell SOC that.
yeah.
Don't tell SOC that.
I know. I guess the bread and butter activists.
I know. Call financial activists.
Financial activists were in Starbucks. So I broke news that Elliot had a stake, and then
Right.
come to
It was
find out,
Elliot. I couldn't remember who the activist was. Right. Okay. And they're
Yeah.
still there. I think it's kind of gone a little quiet. I think, but
Right. But then you had a number of others show up. I think Starboard was there with a small
Right.
stake. Trian, come to find out, had a stake but sold out of it. So it was a company where they were all swarming. But on a personal level, I was just going to throw in, the Starbucks, that was like my first job.
Like your first job,
as a
like
kid,
as a teen.
Like I was a barista back in the day, and so
Man.
it's always kind of fun to follow that company. Having worked there,
because I used to work there. It's like in my generation, you used to work at McDonald's.
Right, exactly.
But now everyone. I used to work at Starbucks. My niece, she's a barista in college, and she used to. Her first job was at Starbucks in high school. It's great.
It was it was a fun gig, but and then of course, the CEO. After the news broke of all these activists, very quickly the CEO was replaced. So that was
canned, right? And they brought Brian
Cornell.
Brian Cornell
from not Cornell. Brian from Chipotle.
Right. And this and
Nickel.
Brian Nickel, and they paid him. They paid him tens of millions of dollars, and I'm a Starbucks investor, and we got billions of dollars of proceeds.
Yeah.
So I was just tickled. So
crazy. That was a fun one.
What do we have? I mean, we'll continue to talk about this, but what are you seeing so far? We started talking about it a minute ago about what this year is going to look like, and maybe we can look a little forward. What are you thinking is going to happen? Like maybe more settlements, or what's the buzz that you've sort of detected?
Yes, I expect that to continue. Just that for the most part, I mean, it's in everyone's best interest, I guess, if these conversations stay, hush hush behind the scenes and,
Sure.
and they can work things out quietly. So I expect that to continue to kind of see more of that versus the full-fledged big proxy battles.
Yeah, big splashy kind of like, proxy war or whatever you call
Right.
it. Yeah, right.
But two themes or things that I think is interesting. One, we just discussed this whole idea of like KKR coming into a situation where there are already activists present. And KKR, we even say in our story, has basically said that they would look for other opportunities to do this down the road. And so this whole convergence of like PE and activism, I think is really fascinating and not super new, but like I wonder how much more of that we're going to see, not just from KKR, but from others.
So there could be PEs, there could be lots of sources of money with lots of dry powder who can make a little bit of a business out of, and this is a very Warren Buffett-esque kind of thing, where they can sort of say, okay, you here's the money, or here's some money, or here's something. You listen to us, and you kind of get to keep your job so well. It's sort of like another version of a white knight with you call the white knight stuff.
White knight, yeah.
But in this era of aggressive activists who are taking advantage of universal proxy and all sorts of other stuff, it may be more relevant than ever. Oh, that's really interesting. So there could be more of that coming down. Okay, cool.
More of that, yeah. And then the one other that I was going to flag is just this. I don't know if you've seen this individual. Certainly online has a big voice. This Robbie Starbuck.
Oh, sure. I get him confused with the company. I always see the headline of him, and I say, "What are they doing now?"
Yeah, I know that's an easy mistake. Honest mistake. Yeah. But he's pushing companies to claw back these DEI initiatives, but I think it will be interesting to watch and see, kind of like what I was saying about Air Products, but if that starts to spill over into the boardroom more so, right? And you actually see the financial activist show up and push for similar changes, or do we see a new flavor of activists? Remember, years ago we had Ubben. He started his inclusive capital, I think was the name, Jeff Ubben, and it's
when he moved on from. It's when he closed. He left ValueAct. ValueAct still existed, but he then moved and started Inclusive. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Right, but that was like all about ESG focused investing, and of course we wrote up a story when he wound that down, or he had to shut the firm down last year, or returned money back to investors.
Right,
and so I wonder if how much do we see the pendulum swing in the other direction? Because I mean, between the civic, political, whatever climate environment influencing this stuff, and then also some of the practicalities and so forth of running funds, there may be a lot more of that. I think is what you're trying to hint at. Yeah, I think so.
All right.
So it should be an interesting year.
Oh yeah. Well, let's do this. Let's ourselves take a little quick break, and we're going to talk more about activism, but also a little bit about business journalism here at Shareholder Primacy.
Shareholder Primacy is brought to you by FreeFlowAnalytics.com, the only free database of corporate directors, their influence, and their performance. If you own a stock or retirement plan, go to FreeFlowAnalytics.com and look up which of your elected directors are performing well and which aren't. Use your vote in the alternative democracy and get your data at FreeFlowAnalytics.com. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Shareholder Primacy. I'm Mike Levin, here with Lauren Thomas of the Wall Street Journal. So let's talk a little bit about activism, but what it's like as a writer and a journalist, a business journalist, to be involved in activist investing. What's it like to cover these cats? And I want to know what it's like to go find, how you find and develop your stories.
Yeah.
What's it like to cover guys like me?
Yeah. No, it's such an interesting world. It's a whole cast of characters for sure. And it's different from covering M&A, I have to say, because I kind of get to wear both
Right.
hats. And so, when I'm breaking news on a deal, there's a certain group of people kind of around it. You have bankers and lawyers and PR professionals, and that's kind of that group. But then obviously the activism community, you have the activists themselves, which I think many of them are known to have more of a personality, and they have a whole team that they're working with.
Little ego there, right?
Certainly, some of them more than others, but there's ego there too. So it's just, and they're able to. I think the thing about activists, and this is why it's created a whole industry around it, but they're able to have more of a megaphone and say things that when you're a public company, you just can't. There are a lot more barriers to that, and so I think that So as a result, yes, I think in having this job, you have to try to get to know some of the key players, of course, and their teams. So getting to know the activists themselves has been really helpful. And of course, some of them are more open than others to having relationships. And there's a whole advisor community. I mean, just like the bankers and lawyers that work on deals, there are bankers and lawyers that work just solely on activism. So
right. And proxy solicitors. Don't forget
the
that.
proxy solicitors too. Oh, definitely the copies of the world.
Right.
And so that whole universe, I feel like I've got a pretty good, toehold into now. And I think it's just like knowing who the players are. So if I ever hear, oh, there could be an activist at so-and-so company, trying to then be able to think through myself, well, knowing what I know about Elliot or knowing what I know about Starboard or Jana, like, could this fit their profile? And it's kind of a process of elimination sometimes, of figuring things out that way. And of course, you just often, you're out and about and you pick up on things going on in the industry and
Sure.
and try to break news that way. But yeah, I think that's the key difference, is the personalities.
So you may have like
world.
some attorneys say, which, and probably
Yeah.
not an attorney. They're probably a little. Well, maybe they are. I don't know. Maybe the attorneys can blab off the record confidentially as much as anybody. But let's some advisor. We'll say advisor that will kind of say, hey, I know there's something going on at XYZ symbol company or something, and then you have to do some sleuthing. And some figuring out about kind of what's going on and kind of fill in some of the detail. It doesn't sound like it's as often that somebody says, oh, and this company is doing this and the activist is here and they're probably not quite as. I mean, that would be wonderful. It would really save you a lot of time.
Right. No kidding.
I would think.
Yeah. No kidding.
So you're sleuthing around the activist community using your contacts and your list of people to try to, again, bring the news out and help, in this case, help investors kind of learn what's going on. And you probably read your share of securities filings and so forth, and do some of that too, proxy statements.
Oh yeah, well, we love the 13F, whale watching or those when those filings come out. It's always interesting to see if there are any new positions, and I guess not new because there's always a trailing factor.
Sure.
It's not the latest and greatest, but always looking for those sorts of things for sure.
Yeah. Let's make a little bit of a distinction here, because I've tracked and I will confess admired some of the scoops and some of the breaks and so forth. That's really kind of fun. Like we talked about Henry this morning. That was, but there's also some more detailed or investigative and so forth. How would you kind of describe the divide, or how much of each do you focus on? My sense is you spend a lot of time doing a lot of kind of running around trying to find stories, but maybe there's a chance to do some of the other stuff too. Describe that.
Maybe the best way I could put it is it's kind of like an 80-20. I think 80-20, an 80-20 rule is about right. Like 80% of the time, I think, spent more on the breaking news, trying to break, have the next scoop on what's Elliot up to, what's Starboard up to, what big M&A deal is getting announced next Monday. Like a big chunk of time, I think, is spent on that. But then I have that other 20% where I do try to constantly have like one or two bigger picture stories in the hopper that I'm chipping away at. So as I'm out and about meeting people, I'm not just asking them about specific situations, but I can also ask them about this other stuff, or more thematics, what have you, and kind of collect string on that. And those are always really rewarding, I have to say. And I think, like, as a reporter, you find that those bigger stories, not necessarily just like what's the deal of the day, but the bigger stories are ones that people talk about for weeks, and people remember them. And so it's always really fulfilling to be able to accomplish one of those, but it's not easy.
Right. And there's probably, the breaking news kind of stuff, or the individual situations kind of I'm not saying they write themselves. You just said you got to do a lot of work, but
right.
Those kind of just kind of happen. And you need to be there with some energy and ingenuity. That's got to be exhausting, by the way, doing some of that stuff. You probably pick yourself up at the end of a day and say, oh, my God. And you made
Michael,
just a little bit of progress.
It's something like that. I know. Sometimes I come home at night and I'm like straight to bed. Yeah.
I mean, this is like a young person's business. That's what I've decided.
I know. Yeah, for sure.
All right. But you'll still do some of because that, some of the longer, like the thing we worked on at the end of the year. That kind of stuff where you're doing some research and kind of, but those kind of incubate, don't they? I mean, you'll have an editor say, okay, take another week or two or another month or whatever.
Exactly. It's nice when there's no pressure. Yeah.
Right. Let me ask you about what life is like at the Wall Street Journal, which, I have been reading for 40 plus years. It's always been, obviously my main source of business news. Through it all, all the ups and downs, and I read their opinion section, so we're going to talk about that. And I'm kind of curious. You've been there about 3 years. You did some other business reporting. Tell us about the Journal a little bit. I'd be kind of curious about that.
Well, I think the Journal is incredible. And I came over from CNBC, which was more of a, there's the broadcast side of the business, and then you had CNBC Digital, CNBC.com, kind of was operating more like a startup. And you feel like coming over to the Journal, it's just such a well-oiled machine, like you said, that has been around for years and years and years. And so now having this opportunity to work with editors or people that have been in the newsroom their whole lives, I think has been like super helpful for someone that's like younger in their career and just starting out and making sense of it all. And, I think it goes without saying, no matter where you work, the Journal, CNBC, anywhere in media nowadays,
Bloomberg, whatever. Yeah, right. Yeah.
The past couple of months, past year or two, there's been a lot of change, and you're seeing that. I think just suddenly, like, the pace of change has really picked up, and we see it within the newsroom, and but I think a lot of it has been kind of inevitable, and ultimately just trying to get businesses like ours in better shape for the future. But so it's been interesting to kind of sit inside the company and watch that play out in real time as well, because as an M&A reporter, I'm also out and about trying to break news on interesting deals in the media space. And so it's like, it really makes you think then when you kind of see stuff happening at your own company as well.
And that's a new beat, right? I think that was just announced kind of toward the end of last year.
You mean my role? Are you saying?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, and not a new beat for the Journal's been covering deals for a very long time.
Yeah,
new beat for you.
Well, basically, I got it was a bit of a, I guess you could say it was a promotion, just
great, mazel tov.
Kind of help.
That's wonderful.
Thank you, to help oversee or spearhead some of our coverage a bit more on M&A. So
okay, and that it's you basically got a nice title, more responsibility. Hope you got a little more money, but I don't even know.
No comment. No.
But yeah, that's fine. But you're doing more. I mean, you've already been covering some M&A, but now because you were, I think you were basically full-time activist for a period of time, right?
But it was I think it was always like I was covering M&A on the side, and I don't know that my job has changed much. I think it's more like there is this expectation that in 2025 deals are really going to pick
deals are picking up already. It's like there's going to be a lot of them, which is great.
So we'll continue to cover activism and follow that world closely, of course. But I think there is an expectation that there will be more M&A to cover this year too. So kind of preparing for that. Yeah.
I know there had been an activist reporter who was your predecessor. I thought maybe it was Carol. I can't remember.
Yes, Cara Lombardo, who's now helps edit, or she helps lead my team now, actually.
And then I thought her predecessor was David Benoit, right?
And David Benoit.
He's your editor now, I think, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's also an editor.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, good. So maybe that look forward to. You don't strike me as someone who wants to be an editor.
That's funny you say that. I don't know. I like what I do now for sure. So I haven't thought that far ahead.
Well, if David and Carol are listening, they should pay attention to this. So
yes, I'll make sure.
All right. So this is so cool.
You have a cool job. You have a cool job too.
Well, thank you. I don't know if you have any questions for anything I can help you with. Anything you're working on right this minute that I know.
Well, I'm curious what you think. I mean, do you expect, like, even with universal proxy, for example? I mean, what are you kind of anticipating for the year?
Well, I think the trend. Part of the problem is that we can say, oh, there's going to be all sorts of big change and so forth. There's change in Washington, and there's some big changes happening in our like larger world. But the world of activism evolves. It evolves, but not as fast as people might otherwise think. So we saw this trend, which was spurred on in part by the whole universal proxy stuff, and we can spend a whole other show talking. I have spent another show talking about it with Ann and so forth.
Right.
But the idea that there's going to be fewer of these high profile proxy contests that go to a vote. The thing with Mantle Ridge and Air Products was just 3 out of 4 seats or whatever. That's going to become a little less of a factor. People want to settle this stuff. We mentioned KKR coming in and spending a bunch of money at Henry Schein and so forth. People want to fix the business. They don't necessarily want to be fighting about this, which is. It's good for me as an investor, probably not quite as good for a writer or a reporter who wants to go to an annual meeting and watch some sort of report on this close vote. That would be kind of cool. But it's going to be, and there's going to be some of those. I have I keep a list of kind of pending proxy contests because I'm interested in.
They're always
proxy. And there's a few. But there'll be more, and there's a lot of data that as we said, stuff settling faster. One of the things that that at least I'm starting to see, and we could talk about, is there's so many more newer, novel ways of pursuing activism and proxy contests. The whole thing with using proxy solicitation for proposals, the idea that universal proxy kind of opened up some new ways for activists to try to influence companies. There's new avenues, for better or for worse, for litigation to try to for activists to try to escalate things. There's all sorts of new dimensions to this that are taking this beyond the standard, notify you my candidates. Let's try to persuade everybody that we're right and you're wrong, and let's see who wins the vote. I think things are getting a little more interesting that way. So there's going to be a lot more fun stuff for us to read about, for you to cover in this coming year, and probably in the years following. How's that? Did
I think so. No,
totally.
Okay? Yes.
Cool.
No, thank you.
All right.
That's usually my job, asking the question.
I wanted to give you a chance to ask me a question or two before we wrap up. So
all good. Perfect.
Hopefully that helped. Anyway, let's do that. Why don't we wrap up? I think I've kept you long enough here and learned some great stuff, and I hope you enjoyed this too.
Yes.
So thanks, Lauren. Terrific talking to you about all this. This is Shareholder Primacy, hosted normally by Ann Lipton and me, Mike Levin. I'm an independent activist investor and advisor to investors about their activist situations. Lauren is, of course, the lead deals reporter at the Wall Street Journal. You can find me, Mike, at theactivistinvestor.com and Lauren at lauren.thomas at WSJ.com. That's the Wall Street Journal. So let her know about breaking news, fun scoops, all sorts of fun things that you're working on that you think you want her to know about. Our podcast is produced and distributed by Free Float Media. Thanks for listening, and we will talk again soon.